Hello everybody, my name is Matthew, also known as Malamenz on the Landover server, as you'll see my name in the top left-hand corner shortly when we begin the action sequences. And welcome to my video presentation for the Online Games Literature New Media Narrative course, run by Professor Clayton at Vanderbilt University, of course, available through Coursera.org. What we're going to be taking a look here today is the variations of how the different mediums handle the source material of Fellowship of the Ring. So we have the book, the movie, and of course what you're watching right now is me playing through the video game of Lord of the Rings Online. One of the things I noticed immediately arriving in this area that is vastly different in the game than it is compared to the book or the movie is that the area is actually full of monsters. Now in the book and of course the movie, they get here before everyone else, or actually after a couple of days after the big flash of lightning at the top of where the top that Strider saw. But for the most part the area is very barren, not just in the landscape but also in life. Now when you get here in the game, obviously there's orc encampments all over the place. So that was one of the things I noticed immediately that's different. We're going to grab the quest here. Now you can do this in a fellowship. I did go solo strictly for recording purposes. But we're going to grab the quest here. We're going to begin our adventure, get the loading screen and some dialogue.
Weathertop, once a watchtower of the Dunedain, now a refuge for orcs. Candaith the Ranger strives to break their foothold in the Weatherhill.
One of the things I immediately noticed was the change in mood. It is now nighttime. You have a slow rain coming down. Not a drizzle, but it is a slow rain. You have the music underneath, which is playing long, drawn-out notes, which creates almost not just tension, but typically an oppression, a feel of oppression. Don't mind me, I'm just going to skip a little bit here, get to the action. You don't need to see me messing around with the interface. But it creates an oppressing feel, which is very similar to what I experienced when I read the book, which is also different from what I experienced when watching the movie. In addition to the oppression that Frodo feels in the book, Fellowship of the Ring, Tolkien also writes in a lot of fear. Now the movie focuses on the action of the scene, but Tolkien really goes for the oppression and the fear. Just a quick passage from the book. Terror overcame Pippin and Merry, and they threw themselves flat on the ground. Sam shrank to Frodo's side. Frodo was hardly less terrified than his companions. He was quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowed up in a sudden temptation to put on the ring. The desire to do this laid hold of him, and he could think of nothing else. So at the beginning of this quest, when you first are transported to the instance, that sense of oppression, and of course it's dark out, which kind of imparts a sense of fear. And while the book focuses more on the fear, I would say it's a more predominant emotion, you also have that sense of oppression which is shared between your initial starting of the instance and that you also share with the book. Now once the action starts, once you actually start jumping in and fighting the monsters along the path, the oppression kind of backs off and you move more towards the action, the adrenaline rush that you get from the scene in the movie with Aragorn coming out and getting a full, it's like 3 or 4 minutes of him wielding a torch and sword around, whereas in the book he does come out with torch and sword, but it's literally one line at the end of a long paragraph, and then thus the chapter comes to an end. Now in this sequence, it's important to note that there is a major difference between video games and compare them to what they have with books and movies. Books and movies, by their nature, are passive experiences, whereas video games are interactive, which naturally creates what developers call player agency. So you actually have more control going over of what's happening inside the video game than you do watching a movie or reading a book. So a book, movie, you're being told the story, whereas a video game, you're being told and interacting at the same time. So by this very nature, the video game itself, Lord of the Rings Online, tends to lend itself more towards the action side of the story. While, as I mentioned at the beginning, when you first enter the instance, you still have that sense of foreboding, that oppression, and a little bit of the fear that you got from the book. You definitely get the adrenaline rush that you experience even passively watching from the movie itself. So just the natural player agency that you get does set it apart from the source material of the Fellowship of the Ring and of the movie itself. And so what we have is just, you have 3 different mediums with 3 different strengths and 3 different weaknesses, and thus you have 3 different experiences from reading the book to watching the movie to playing the video game, which is pretty much what we've been talking about the entire course. So, last thing I did want to note real quick is that the video game, Professor Clayton talks about it a lot in the first week lectures, but the video game actually does a really good job of putting in the details that is described in the book. A much better job than the movie does. Now, the movie is a little bit more limited in what they can do and what they can show, but the game itself has actually done an excellent job of using the source material to create the world around it. So, and with that in mind, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in game.